water control is something you want to practice. That's what's going to make your watercolor. If you're wondering, like, why doesn't my watercolor look like the other watercolor I see, this is one of the most important things that you can learn. These are little cards that come in all of my watercolor kits so that you can play with your watercolor before you actually go right onto the paper. So I'm just going to use my size 4 Aqua Elite. I've got my 2 cups of water off to the side. One is fresh, one is dirty. I've got my watercolor and I've got my plate. So what I want to do with this is we're going to pick a color. We're going to go in and get some of this beautiful blue. Purple. Been a long day, been a long day. This is like a grape looking purple. And I'm going to put a lot, I'm going to go right in there and I'm going to put a lot of that right there on my plate. Okay, so this is a lot of paint that I'm pulling off of my palette and putting onto my plate. Okay, now if you look at my brush, there's just a whole lot of purple on there, color. So when I look over here, water control is something you want to practice. That's what's going to make your watercolor. If you're wondering, like, why doesn't my watercolor look like the other watercolor I see, this is one of the most important things that you can learn when you are learning watercolor. So see here, we have a chart. So more pigment or less pigment. So if you're going something with more pigment, it means you're using less water. Okay? If you're using a whole lot of water, it means you're using less pigment. So basically, I'm going to show you here kind of quickly that, remember, I just pulled pure pigment off of that watercolor palette. And this is really thick. It's not swimming around on my plate. When I go to move my plate around, it's really not even moving. So it's almost the consistency of butter. So watch what happens when I fill in my butter. I'm going to do it on the side. You see what happens when I use that. My watercolor is almost like a dry brush. There's so much pigment on this paintbrush and not a lot of water. So that is a very thick consistency, and it's a great technique to use if you want to paint things, say like waves of the ocean, and you want white peeking through. You can leave a lot of white showing through by using your paint in a very thick butter-like consistency. So I'm going to take, I don't want to bore you, but like I said, this stuff's fun to me. So I'm going to take my water. I'm going to just dip my brush in there really quickly. A little bit of water on there. And I'm going to add that to my puddle, to my purple. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to fill in my circle. It's like, we call this cream. Think about the cream that you put in your coffee or your tea. It's thick, but it's not butter thick. Okay, I can still bring it around. I can still fill the paper in, but it's pretty thick. It's still a whole lot of pigment. So then if I take and add more water, I did one little flick of my brush into the water, and I'm going to come in to my same thing. I'm not putting any more pigment into that. I can come in here now, and I will come fill in my milk circle. Now, if you notice, it's a lot thinner, like milk. It's filling in my circle very well. But you can see where it's a little bit lighter. I get the translucency of the watercolor is coming through now, right? So I can see some hints of the paper, the white of the paper. Now guess what? If I come in now again and add another drop of water, and I'm working that around in my brush, we think about coffee in our cup. So I'll come in here with my watercolor, coffee in my cup, and I'm just going to come around. You can see yet again, that went on a lot more smoothly but yet like coffee, you still can't see right through it. So it's still pretty thick, and I'm using a very vibrant color. So I hope that this is something that you can see on the screen. I'm going to add more water to my brush now, and I'm going to mix that yet in again. You can see on the page, on the plate, how thin that pigment is now getting because we're using a lot of watercolor. This last one should show you my tea, right? So I'm gonna bring that in, and you can see where this purple's a very vibrant color, but I'm getting a lot more of the paper showing through. Hope that you can see it. Now, if this wasn't such a dark color, this would have went very light on its own, but I can still keep coming back in here and adding more water. The more water that I add, the lighter and see-through my color is going to get, right? Because it's such a pigmented color, I'm not getting a really good, I'm not able to show you really well, but we're going to get there, right? So the more water that I use, the more paper you can see through. And I can just keep adding water to my paint until it basically disappears on the paper. So I don't know if that helps a little bit, but practice these things because you can get so many different looks from just using one color of paint. That was the other thing I wanted to show you guys, right? Wet on wet means putting paint, which is wet, watercolor, of course, is wet, and we're going to paint it on the paper. Now, if I just took this purple, just like we did here, and I paint it on the paper, just like that, I'm painting wet onto dry paper. I'm just going to color and cover that up pretty good. So wet onto dry paper. Now, if I come over here now and wet my paper first with just clear water, so I've wet my square, I'm going to pick up my paint, which is also wet, so I'm going to do wet color on top of wet paper, and you can get different looks, right? So I can let that now just bleed and do, I can get fun looks that I couldn't get this way, right? So just keep that in mind. We'll set that off to the side. Just little things to keep in mind when you are painting